The whole point of this episode is to prove that, yes, hockey is extremely Canadian, but to a fault, as
in
most
all the
displays
worst ways.
as most displays of nationalism or using sport as an apparatus for nationalism. And speaking of Vimy Ridge and what I just fucking said, let's talk about Don fucking Cherry. Remember when the CBC made like a top 10 list for
Number
everybody to
6,
vote
baby.
on? Yeah, and he was number 6. Did he beat the insulin guy, or was he just like behind him?
I think he beat the insulin guy.
He beat Mr. Insulin.
Greatest Canadians.
Which, by the way, I'm disrespecting him, obviously, by calling him Mr. Insulin.
We are eventually going to do an episode just on Don Cherry, by the way. I think that's worth mentioning.
Do you think we should do that? So maybe I'll skip over some of these instances.
Probably, because I want to read his books. I want to read his books and actually pull quotes from them and be like, this person is the 6th. Nope. Sorry, he is 7. So I will read you the list of greatest Canadians. And you can tell me if Don Cherry is in the... Not that he doesn't belong on this list, because genuinely, when we think of great, we tend to think of great in a good way, rather than the greatest example of what it means to traditionally be Canadian, for better or particularly for worse, right?
Which, by the way, maybe before you do the list, just really quickly, Don Cherry, for those who don't know, is a Canadian ice hockey commentator. He's also a sports writer. He's a retired professional hockey player and an NHL coach. He played one game with the Boston. He played one game with the Boston Bruins, one game, and then later coached the team for 5 seasons. By the way, for the fucking AHL, again, for a Boston team. From 1986 to 2019, Cherry co-hosted Coach's Corner, a segment aired during CBC's Saturday night NHL broadcast with Ron McLean. He is nicknamed Grapes for his outspoken manner and opinions and his flamboyant dress. That's who Don Cherry is. Where is he on the list of greatest Canadians in relation to who?
I grew up very close to Don Cherry. I would see him at Fabricland all the time growing up.
Getting his suit material, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What a dumb joke. I'm sorry.
No, that's exactly what he was doing. Because he's known for those who... Yeah, no,
what
he was...
fucking psycho.
Yeah, he was at Fabricland, finding patterns and shit. We would see him all the fucking time. Because my mom
I assume
would go
this
there,
is how Buffalo Bill gets dressed for a fucking wedding.
For those who don't know, he wears the most insane suits. Just Google Don Cherry right now if you're listening. But, okay, so our 10 greatest Canadians, by the way, this list... if it was created today, because this is from 2004,
it would have Grimes and Drake on it.
It would have Grimes and Drake, and who's that dude? Who's the People's Party of Canada? It would have Maxime Bernier at number 1. But yeah, it's
he's got the internet effort.
Yeah, it is. Let's take a look. Number 1, Tommy Douglas, father of Medicare. Number 2, Terry Fox, who I found out no one ever thinks about outside of Canada. Pierre Trudeau, who declared martial law in Canada. Yeah, and has 2 fail sons, one of whom is our current prime minister. Sir Frederick Banting, perhaps one of the only good people on this list. He discovered insulin, licensed it for free to the University of Toronto so that everyone could have access and it wouldn't be for profit. And now pharmaceutical companies in the U.S. are charging 600 people for a month of life-saving medication. David Suzuki, who has somehow become the most hated person in this country by the time this came out. Lester B. Pearson, who won the Nobel Peace Prize for, I don't know, he did some sort of peacekeeping mission. He was a big guy in the blue helmets. Almost definitely part of some deeper conspiracy theories we won't get into. Number 7, Don Cherry, hockey coach and commentator from Kingston, Ontario. Yeah. And he is number 7, which means he comes ahead of Sir John A. Macdonald, our genocidal, alcoholic first prime minister and founder of this country.
Yeah, I mean, aside from those little stains on his record that you just mentioned, he fucking started the country and didn't play for the Boston Bruins. But anyways,
didn't place ahead of the hockey guy. Number 9 is Alexander Graham Bell, who did not actually invent the telephone. He stole the telephone and then founded a mega corporation that currently rips people off for ISP rates. And number 10 is Wayne Gretzky, who's an insane right-wing nut, and won, I guess, a couple of Stanley Cups in an era where it was easier to win Stanley Cups in dynasties.
Also, RIP to his bar in downtown Toronto. COVID got a real one with
Yeah.
that one. Really sorry to Gretzky, but yeah. So
This
Cherry,
list sucks, by the way. I
Yeah,
just want to
this-
point out.
but basically, what we're trying to illustrate here is people seem to really like Don Cherry in this fucking country for some reason. So there's clearly something about him and the things that he says on TV that people like. What has he said on TV? Cherry has sometimes proven controversial for making political comments during his show Coach's Corner, having faced criticism for remarks regarding Canada's lack of support for the 2003 invasion of Iraq, insinuating that only European and French guys wore visors on their helmets, and denying climate change. In November 2019, Cherry was fired by Sportsnet from Hockey Night in Canada for comments that suggested Canadian immigrants benefit from the sacrifices of veterans, but do not wear Remembrance Day poppies.
You know, I was talking to a veteran. I said, I'm not going to run the poppy thing anymore because what's the sense? I live in Mississauga. Nobody wears, very few people wear a poppy. Downtown Toronto, forget it, downtown Toronto, nobody wears a poppy. And I'm not going to, he says, wait a minute. How about running it for the people that buy them? Now, you go to the small cities, and you know those, the rows on rows, you people love, you that come here, whatever it is, you love our way of life, you love our milk and honey. At least you could pay a couple of bucks for poppies or something like that. These guys pay for your way of life that you enjoy in Canada. These guys paid the biggest price. Anyhow, I'm going to run it again for you great people and good Canadians that bought a poppy. I'm still going to run it anyhow.
Love you for it.
Do you want to talk about the poppies first, or some of these weird incidents that I'd never heard of?
Yeah, like Canadians wear poppies on Remembrance Day to remember the dead, and it's like a lightning rod for right-wing discourse. Like the left wants to take away the poppy and says "fuck the veterans," which is like no one gives a fuck. You know what I mean? Like, but it becomes a big thing if you don't wear a poppy, especially if you're like a high-profile public figure. But like, again, going back to like when the Wildcat strikes happened. Over the NBA bubble, like the NBA obviously shut down and then the MLB followed suit, but the NHL would not. The NHL basically did it to fall in line with all the other sports, MLS, MLB, and the NBA, a day after, actually. So it's like, it's worth thinking about that in the context of stuff like this. Like hockey, both because of its like history as a white sport, right, that didn't emerge. Hockey didn't emerge out of like black culture and like, you know, inner cities the way basketball did. And hockey actually basically drummed out any potential Jackie Robinson figure. Like there were a couple of Indigenous players in the 1920s and 30s who were victims of racism. The first Asian player, Larry Kwong, played 2 games and then was demoted to the minor leagues because he was Asian. Like he was a very good player.
Jeez.
They just wouldn't, no one would let him play because like we can't have an Asian on the ice, right? So it's like, yeah, like hockey never had a Jackie Robinson figure quite intentionally and quite specifically in Canada. Isn't this like very unique space to leverage the fact that like we had slavery end a lot earlier than the US and like a different relationship with like blackness. It's still violent, right? But not in the public perception. So that like hockey still is like a white dominated sport.